Alright, what is going on everyone, and welcome back to the Bit of Footy YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be running through my Week 2 2023 AFL Finals tips, as well as previewing every game. And we're also going to see how my tips did back for Week 1 as well. So let's do that first off. Alright, so in Week 1, starting off with the first game, I tipped my Pies to win the qualifying final against Melbourne by a margin of 7 points, and I got that bloody dead on. Collingwood won, and they got up by 7 points, so I was very happy with that. And I was very happy with my Pies getting the job done in that game and moving on to a prelim. Up the Pies. Next game was the elimination final between Carlton and Sydney, and I tipped Carlton to win by 13 points. And they ended up getting the job done by a margin of 6 points. So I got the team correct. I just didn't get the margin correct for that one. I was fairly close though. It was 13 points. Well, it was around 13, 14 points at one stage in the final quarter. But then, yeah, the margin ended up being 6 points after the Swans kicked the last goal of the game. Then the second elimination final between St Kilda and GWS. I tipped the Giants to get the job done by 8 points. Again, I got the team correct. I just didn't get the margin correct. I didn't really think the Giants would end up winning by the margin that they did of 24 points. But that's how much they won by. So yeah. And the last game was the second qualifying final between Brisbane and Port Adelaide. Again, I got the team correct. I just didn't get the margin correct. Brisbane ended up winning by 48 points, where I tipped them by 21 points. So yeah, I was a bit off in that one, I would say. But anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at my tips for Week 2 of the 2023 AFL Final Series. Alright, kicking off the second week of the 2023 AFL Final Series, the week of the semi-finals. We've got the first semi-final between Melbourne and Carlton, which will be played on Friday night at the MCG. Melbourne are coming off that 7-point loss in the qualifying final against my Pies, while Carlton are coming off that 6-point win against Sydney in the elimination final. So yeah, both teams are coming off close margin games from week 1 of the 2023 AFL Final Series. Having a look at the last 3 games between these two clubs. Melbourne has won 2 of the last 3 games between these two clubs, whereas obviously Carlton have won 1 of the last 3 games between these two clubs. The most recent encounter was the very controversial finishing game where Carlton won by 4 points and the scoreline was 60 to Carlton and 56 to Melbourne. But yeah, obviously it had that controversial finish where we had to go to the score review to see if Petrarca's kick at goal got touched before going over the goal line or it didn't. And obviously the ARC had inconclusive evidence, so we had to go to the umpire's call, and the umpire's call was a touch behind, and it ended up seeing Carlton win that game by a margin of 4 points over Melbourne. Having a look at the last 5 games for both of these clubs, kicking off with Melbourne, they have won 3 of their last 5 games. The most recent game for Melbourne being that 7-point loss against my Pies, whereas on the Carlton side of things, Carlton have won 4 of their last 5 games, with their most recent game being that 6-point win against Sydney in the elimination final. So this game is going to be a very, very tough game to tip for a lot of people, I reckon. I can really see it going both ways this game, and I just feel like it's going to be a very tense game of football, and I can see it being a very highly contested game of footy as well, because obviously both sides will not want to get eliminated, especially Melbourne as well, because obviously last year they got eliminated in straight sets, so they wouldn't want to see that happen this year as well. Having a look at the last 3 encounters as well, most games between these two clubs have been very close margin games. Obviously, the last game between these two clubs, Carlton got the job done by a margin of 4 points. The game before that, Melbourne got the job done by 17 points. And the game before that, Melbourne got the job done by a margin of 5 points. So I reckon we can sort of expect a close game between these two clubs, especially with Melbourne's defence as well, as good as it is. So I really can't see whoever wins this game winning by a margin over maybe 12 points or 10 points or whatever. So I've kept my tip very close, and I've tipped Carlton. I've tipped Carlton to get the job done in this game by a margin of 5 points. Like I said before, I really can't see whoever wins this game winning by a margin of over like 10 or 12 points. So yeah, I've tipped Carlton to get the job done by a margin of 5 points. I just really feel like they're going to come out in this game very energized, kick a few goals, but then Melbourne will come back into it, and then Melbourne's defense will sort of, hold up a little bit. But yeah, Carlton in the end will just find a way, like Collingwood did last week against Melbourne. Carlton will just find a way to get the job done over Melbourne in this final, and we'll move on to a preliminary final against Brisbane. I'm tipping Carlton to get the job done over Melbourne in this game by a margin of 5 points. I mean, if Carlton do win this game, obviously the massive talking point will be Melbourne getting eliminated in straight sets again. It's just going to be a massive game, this one. It's going to be a massive crowd as well. Obviously, tickets have already sold out for this game. So I just can't wait to see how this game turns out. Like I said before, though, I can see both teams, I can see this game going both ways is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, this game is just a very tough game to tip. But I've tipped Carlton to get the job done by 5 points in this game. And move on to a preliminary final against Brisbane. All right, now moving on to the second semi-final. We've got Port Adelaide taking on GWS at the Adelaide Oval on Saturday night. Port Adelaide are coming off that 48-point loss against Brisbane last week in the qualifying final, whereas GWS are coming off a 24-point win over St Kilda last week in an elimination final. Having a look at the last 3 encounters between these two clubs, Port Adelaide have won all of the last 3 games between these two clubs. Their most recent encounter was where Port Adelaide got the job done by a margin of 51 points, where the scoreline was 136 to Port Adelaide to 85 to GWS. It was a pretty big win to Port Adelaide the last time these two sides met. Having a look at the last 5 games for both of these clubs, starting off with Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide have won 3 of their last 5 games. Their most recent game obviously being that 48-point loss against Brisbane in the qualifying final. Taking a look at GWS's last 5 games, they've also won 3 of their last 5 games, and they've won 3 in a row as well coming into this game. So that will, obviously give them a bit of confidence going into this game. Their most recent game was obviously that 24-point win over St Kilda in the elimination final. So this is another very tough game to tip. I feel like semi-finals are always going to be tough games to tip. You just never know what's going to happen. Well, to be honest, you just never know what's going to happen in any finals game. So that's what makes finals so good to watch. But yeah, for this game, I have tipped Port Adelaide to get the job done over GWS by a margin of 15 points. I do feel like it's going to be relatively close for the majority of the game. But Port Adelaide will just, edge it out at the end of the game and get the job done. To be honest, in my head, I just can't really see Port Adelaide going out in straight sets. from the season that they've had. They've played some very good footy, especially at home as well. So I'm just finding it really hard for Port Adelaide to get eliminated in straight sets. But, you know, we have seen it done before. I mean, we've had Melbourne eliminated in straight sets. We've had Brisbane eliminated in straight sets. And, you know, they got eliminated in straight sets at the Gabba. So it's not like it can't happen in this game. But yeah, in my head, I just cannot see Port Adelaide going out in straight sets. So I have tipped Port Adelaide to get the job done by a margin of 15 points in this game against the Giants. But, you know, I really can see the Giants getting the job done. Obviously, there's that stat going around where, you know, GWS have now won at 11 venues this year, I think, or whatever it is, which is a crazy stat by itself. So yeah, I can see the Giants getting the job done. And, you know, if the Giants can, you know, get the game into their hands and really get their game style going with that Orange Tsunami sort of game style that they have, it could be a little bit tough for Port Adelaide, and you just never know in the end. You just never know in the end. I mean, if maybe, you know, if the Giants can find a way to, you know, just frustrate Port Adelaide, it could go a long way in seeing the Giants get the job, getting the job done in this game. But, you know, like I said before, in my head, I just cannot see Port Adelaide with the season that they've had this year going home in straight sets, especially in front of their home fans at the Adelaide Oval. So yeah, I'm back again, Port Adelaide over GWS in this game by a margin of 15 points. Alright, and there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are my tips for week 2 of the 2023 AFL Final Series. Leave your tips in the comments below and compare them to mine. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you guys enjoy this week of the 2023 AFL Final Series. And yeah, cheers guys for watching this video. Hopefully you have a good one. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys in another video in the future. Cheers.